Good afternoon, everyone. Kathy, Mark, Josh, I'm assuming everybody can hear and see me okay. I'm Matt Bokar. I'm a project manager with Carlton Hart. I do a little bit to help out with the COTE DDS. I'll be doing a quick intro today, be doing Q&A at the end. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate you making time. It's always tough. We're all working on deadlines. I'm going to share my screen for one moment. And if I didn't mess that up, Mark or Josh, could you give me a you can see the community agreements?
Yep, all good.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I'll pause here just for a moment. We always share our community agreements before we get started on our DDS presentations. First, we're grateful to Mark and Josh for sharing their time and expertise with us today. I'm sure, like all of you, you've toured buildings recently after they open. It's exciting and you get to see everything new and fresh. And today I'm really jazzed because it's that rare opportunity for the feedback loop learning in this open and inclusive conversation around buildings have been open, operational. How's that been going? Boom. Technology. So digital design series means we have the convenience of meeting from wherever you are, from wherever we are. Just some friendly reminders about your microphone and camera during the presentation. Also, please note continuing education credits are available. Kathy's here from AIO, and put your name on screen for us. And Kathy already started recording this presentation, so please note that it's being recorded. Upcoming DDS events. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming up, insightful opportunities for learning and knowledge sharing. So please check out this page. Please go to the website, sign up for more presentations that sound interesting to you. And then finally, we need to shout out our sponsor, Better Bricks. Without them, the DDS wouldn't be possible, wouldn't be happening. Like I said at the top, I'll be monitoring the chat, so please use the chat if you have questions. Mark and Josh, if there's something urgent that needs to be answered during the presentation, we'll address it. We'll pause after Mark, and then we'll try to hold everything until the end, just so we have enough time to go through all this good stuff. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it off to our two presenters, Mark Bruni at PAE and Josh Cabot at SERA. Mark, I think you're going first. Is that right?
I think so. Let me try and share my screen. Can you see that?
Yeah, we see it in presenter mode, I think, right now. So it's small. It's not full size.
Okay, wrong one. Let me try again. How's that?
That's perfect.
Yep, looks great.
Excellent. Okay, we get started then. And I will set my watch to make sure that I stay on time. So yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Mark Bruni. I'm a mechanical engineer principal here at PAE. Have been working on our living building from sort of the inception of the project to all of the tours that we're doing now. So always happy to talk about it and share our lessons learned. So yes, that's the project today. Let's see here. There we go. Just a little bit about PAE. If you don't know us, we are a MEP engineering firm, do some lighting, some technology, building performance analysis, also mainly on the West Coast. We have 6 offices. Our headquarters are here in the Portland Living Building, 200 people roughly in Portland, a couple larger offices in Seattle and LA, and then smaller offices in Spokane and Eugene. We're just certified, B Corp labeled, or the other way around, just labeled B Corp certified. So yeah, I kind of did this building as something that we really aligned with our values. And we kind of start all of our tours with this, and I thought it was appropriate to start the presentation with this also, just to take a moment to recognize that the land that this project I'm going to be talking about sits on is the unceded territory of the Multnomah, the Cathlamet, the Clackamas, the bands of the Chinook, the Tuala, and the Kalapuya, and the Malala tribes. These tribes have been here for over 12,000 years, and Portland has the 9th largest native population, urban population in the country right now. So so that's where our building is. This is the building as it stands today. And in this presentation, I want to walk through some of the systems just to kind of get everyone oriented first, specifically around how we achieve net zero energy operation on site, what some of those limitations were, how our water systems are intended to operate, how they've been doing, and then what the user experience has been in the building. At a high level, our project is a 58,000 square foot office building here in Portland, downtown, built to meet all of the petals of the Living Building Challenge. We completed it in 2021, so a couple of years ago. It's been more than 85% leased out and occupied since September 2022. So we have 14 months of, at this point now, net positive operation that we're really proud of. Just a couple of the stats on here. Our EUI right now, we're operating at about 17 kBTU per square foot per year. So very, very low energy use in our building. The team that did it was ZGF as architect, KPFF for structural, Brightworks to manage the red list, which is a component of the Living Building Challenge, Biohabitats for our sustainable water systems, Walsh Construction was our GC, Edlin & Co. was the development partner, and then PAE led the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, lighting, technology, and energy systems. And our offices are now on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors of this. I mentioned the Living Building Challenge. So our goal was full certification for all 7 petals. So place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. We're currently in our performance period. We actually just completed our performance period and we're finishing the documentation now. So hopefully by the end of the year, we're actually officially certified. You have to prove that performance for 1 year. We had coined an unofficial 8th petal, what we called net positive financial. And this was really a nod to the developer-led design that we had and the pro forma that we had to meet. Our building had investors who were expecting about a 10% rate of return on the investment. And one of our hopes with this project was to show that a Living Building Challenge compliant project can be just as financially sustainable as it is environmentally. And I think one of the interesting data points now is that sort of post-COVID, we are 85% leased out, which is much, much better than a lot of buildings downtown. So I think it speaks to the value proposition of Living Building Challenge that we have found for ourselves. Okay, so diving into the energy and water systems a little bit. I'm going to start with kind of a high-level view of our building. And what you see here, the building in the center there, is our 133 rooftop array, solar array, kW array. It services also our drinking water collector for the building. And there were 2 really big challenges that I think are worth mentioning as we dive into this. The first was that because we're building in the Old Town district, we had to meet some pretty specific requirements. And what the Historic Commission here in Portland told us is that they were not going to accept any photovoltaic that would be visible from the street. So it set some real limitations on where we could put PV and kind of constrained it to the roof area. Also, our utility, Portland General Electric, had restrictions about how much we could backfeed to the grid. At first, that number was 0 kW backfeed, and we ended up negotiating with them to backfeed about 50 kW at any one time. And so the PV you see here fills about 80% of the roof, and it provides 9 EUIs worth of power. So that stat you saw on the previous slide was about 16. So we had a little bit of a gap we still had to fill in. I'll tell you how we did that here in a second. This diagram illustrates the mechanical systems that use most of that energy in our building. And what you can see on the roof, we have a series of air source heat pumps. Those are condensing units that sit on the roof. The use of those in lieu of geothermal is really driven by that developer-led model. We couldn't afford ground-coupled heat pumps. Our heat pump system, the way that it works is it heats and cools water that we circulate then through radiant floors. We sort of switch that off seasonally between heating and cooling. In the shoulder season, we use the windows as natural ventilation to cool when we're in a heating mode, but we still need cooling in the shoulder season. We have heat recovery ventilators at each floor. You see those on the right side of the building, and a little bit of supplemental heating and cooling in those as well. And all in all, like I said, we use about 16, 17 kBTU per square foot per year to operate the building. So really low, but with a little bit of a gap, and we needed to fill that gap to generate enough energy to meet net positive energy operation. And the way that we did it was with this partner array that we had. Our general contractor, Walsh, was constructing another building in Portland. It was an affordable housing building, and we were able to make an arrangement with the owner of that, Reach, to donate an array to their project to meet the additional solar that we needed on ours. So we have these two arrays, one on site on the PAE Living Building and another off site at the Reach Renaissance Commons. On site, we use a battery and a microgrid to manage the power backfeed and stay within that 50 kW limit that the utility set for us. Limits like these, by the way, are really common in downtown cores throughout the country. So it was a good problem to try and figure out a solution for. And our design is to use a battery and charge it when we have more power than is available, than we can backfeed. And then when we're not generating power at night, for example, to slowly discharge that battery or that power from the battery back at a rate that's within the backfeed limit. If our battery can't accept any more power, then the microgrid curtails the solar. That is, it shuts it off some of the solar panels. It just kind of opens the circuit on those, and that limits our PV production. And I say that and remember that because we'll get back to it. It is definitely one of the lessons learned that I'll get to here in a couple of minutes.
Mark?
Yeah.
There's been a question. Your screen sharing, that little bar across the top is kind of in the way of some of the images. Is there any way you can move that?
Maybe.
If you can't figure it out, then it's fine. But I just wanted to see if there was a way that you could move it so people could see the full.
Does that look better?
Perfect. Yes, it's gone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the Reach Renaissance Commons, and this is our offsite array that has a 215 kW solar array. It produces more than $20,000 worth of electricity every year, and it's worth about 12 EUI points. So that between that and the one on site, we get about 20 EUIs worth of power production, 21. And the interesting thing about this is the Reach Renaissance Commons keeps the value of that energy. So that $20,000 is essentially a donation to them every year through the PV operation. And we wrote a contract with them that they retire the renewable energy credits on our behalf. And so then at the PAE Living Building, we purchase renewable energy from the grid for whatever the gap is that we aren't generating on site, so that net there's enough renewable energy for both projects to legitimately say they're using renewable energy. And this kind of met the intent of the Living Building Challenge, provided Reach a really nice benefit, and got us enough solar to get to net zero energy operation. Let's see here, if I can get this to advance. There we go. One more slide on systems, then I'm going to jump into performance here. I just want to make sure I get everyone oriented. So this is our diagram of our water system. So imagine you're a drop of rain and you fall on the roof of our building. You're going to run down to the storm drain and you're going to end up in our 71,000 gallon cistern. From there, you will be treated through filtration, UV, some chlorination. The rain gets treated to potable standards and ends up in the drinking water fixtures. We've been drinking rainwater since March, and it's gone pretty well. It's gone really well. If you don't get swallowed after coming out of the drinking water fixtures, you end up in the gray water system. From the gray water, it goes to the toilets and the urinals. The toilets all end up in the composters, where the rain will either evaporate, most of it's been evaporating, or go to the leachate tank. From the urinals, it's a hybrid waterless urinal that flushes once a day. It ends up in the nutrient recovery tank. It gets processed into fertilizer, actually, and that fertilizer is now available at garden stores here in Portland. So that's roughly our water system. I'll get into how it's been performing here in just a second. Yeah, so performance. Start with energy. This chart shows the actual versus the modeled energy that we've had over the last 24 months roughly of operation here. As you can see, it's gone pretty well. The green bar is the modeled energy, what we expected. The gray bars are the gray bars are the actual. So you see what the gray bars are not touching the green bars, that means we're using less energy than anticipated. It's about 85% of the anticipated energy. And the delta that we have between those two, I think, is due to some conservatism in our model, and also from fewer people coming into the office day to day, sort of post-COVID now, and plugging in their computers. And that effect of the occupancy is pretty modest because we're still heating and cooling all of the space. We're still lighting the space. So it's really just the laptop plug load that isn't showing up in the space that's creating the difference. This slide shows the annual production of the offsite array at Reach. And you can see it's really close to what we anticipated. The overage that you see is, so the yellow bars are taller than the green line, is because we actually added a few more panels right at the end of our design period because our EUI, the predicted EUI was creeping up and we wanted a little bit more safety factor. So I think the production is actually really, really close to what we had expected. So that's the good. It's a different story here at the PAE Living Building, where we've had some pretty significant struggles getting our array and our microgrid fully operational. And the trouble in our case here had to do with that utility backfeed limitation. Our battery system, once it was installed, had a hardware limitation that we didn't know about in design, and it could not meet the utility requirements. And so we were set into that curtailment situation where we're having to turn off some of the solar. And to compound that problem, the microgrid system, the communications were pretty slow at first, just because it was going through too many different sort of components of the system to closely manage the building's really dynamic loads and the PV power input. You can imagine all that stuff's changing pretty quickly and dynamically, and we needed to stay under the 50 kW at all times. And so we were kind of over curtailing our PV, the system was. And so our engineers actually were literally trying to reprogram this thing and helping the contractor team get this figured out. And what happened was in July of this year, we finally got the communications issue solved, and you can kind of see our performance bumped up quite a bit in July. So July, August, September, we're starting to do a lot better because we're curtailing a lot less. And as we speak, actually right now downstairs, there are battery upgrades in process. The battery system is being switched out. So we expect probably by January, we're going to have the yellow bars touching the green bars because our battery will be fully operational. The good news is that we had enough safety factor built in, and our energy use being lower than anticipated, that we're still achieving about 110% net positive operation for the last 12 months. So the big lessons learned here are, safety factors are really important. We wanted a 10% safety factor. We ended up with about a 5%, but it was enough to get us there. And then lesson number 2 is that just the microgrid and battery systems are, right now, they're cutting edge, maybe bleeding edge technology. They're bespoke systems, and they take a lot of commissioning to make work. So don't underestimate the commissioning on that. From a sort of thermal performance side, the radiant floors are working really, really well. The design concept with this is for really low loads on the envelope, near passive level operation, really. And then we heat and cool almost all of it from the floor. We want the floor to do all that heavy lifting. And that combination of super low loads and the sort of even heating and cooling that we get from the floor has worked just really, really well. It's been super comfortable in the winter, in the summer, and in the shoulder seasons. One anecdote that we had a zone where the control wires actually got disconnected last winter, and there was no heating for several weeks, might have even been a month or so. And we found out not because anyone complained that was in that space, but because we were doing an audit of the spaces with a thermal imaging camera, and we saw that the floor was off. So it was just interesting to see that it's like the building is tight enough, it has enough mass that you can turn the heat off and no one even notices for a while. Another thing we're doing now this year is we actually have, you can see the warm zone. We have one zone where we've set the temperature up a little bit more, and we hotel all the desks, so it's sort of open seating to allow people to thermally migrate to the spaces that they want. We had a couple of people that said they were a little cold, so we made one warm zone in the building. Some lessons learned from the windows here. I think the animation is going. Let me see. Oh no. Animate the windows opening. You can see them opening here. They open pretty slow. There's not sound with this. They're pretty noisy. There's really only two actuator products there, and they're both kind of slow and noisy. It's not really a problem, but it's just something to be aware of, and something to get used to. The street noise gets kind of bounced in from the awning also. I think maybe a casement window might have been a little bit quieter situation for our sort of downtown location. From a passive cooling perspective, we have a relatively few amount of these automated windows, maybe 1 or 2% of the total wall area, and it is plenty for passive space cooling. We do a night flush with it, works really, really well. One of the things we didn't incorporate into the automatic window system was an air quality sensor. I think Sarah's office actually has air quality sensors on them. If I was going to do this again, I would build that into the sequence of operations to have the system automatically keep the windows closed if it was smoky or air quality was poor. Right now, we just have to go in and we do that manually. See, moving on to the water systems. Generally, these systems have been working really well. The vacuum flush system uses about 1/10 of a gallon of water per flush. That's about 10% or less than 10% even of a typical toilet. It's been really pretty problem-free. It's been easy and comfortable for people to use. I would say the vacuum flush has been a total success. The composters themselves, those are the big blue bins you see here. They've been working really well. The compost process is going well. We have not emptied them yet in 2 years. We've emptied our leachate tank once. The leachate tank is the tank where any liquid that is in the composters that doesn't evaporate drains down into that. So it's been, not a lot of water coming off of the composters, actually. The main issue that we've been fighting with the composters has been some small fruit flies that have established them in the composters. And it was something we knew about. The composting companies said it can be an issue from time to time. They're staying localized to the mechanical room, so it's really not an issue for people working in the building, but they're drawn to little lights, including LED lights on any equipment in the room. And so they're starting to get into the equipment, which is just an issue we're watching pretty closely because, we just want to make sure they don't actually damage anything in there. And so we're trying to treat them through some natural methods to kind of get that population back down again. You can see here, we actually ended up putting some insect screen on the servers that are in the room because they were literally getting into the computers. We had bugs in the computers. The nutrient recovery system is working well. You can buy this product now at Garden Fever, at Portland Nursery, a couple other garden stores around town. It's FDA approved and has been a pretty fun process to be a part of. I have a bottle of this sitting at home waiting for my tomatoes next year. So I can come back next year and tell you how my tomatoes did. The big green bin here in the middle, kind of in the middle of this photo, is the gray water system. Gray water has been one of the tougher systems to get online, to be honest. We have dishwashers connected to it, which technically makes this a black water system, and it elevates the level of coliform testing that's required by the Oregon Health Authority. So the way that we deal with that, we have filters and we have a UV light. We're trying to treat that to get this water clean enough to where we can use it for flushing. It's only going to the toilets, the urinals, and our irrigation system. What has happened is that the UV has not always been able to eradicate all of the coliform bacteria. And we think we've isolated the problem to the cast iron waste piping that we're using. It's leaching a little bit too much iron into the water, and the bacteria are essentially hiding behind the little metal particles. And so this week we're installing an iron filter that we think is going to deal with that problem, and we'll be able to get the system up and running. On the potable water side, the blue skid that you see over on the left is the rainwater treatment system. I think I mentioned earlier, we've been 100% off of city water since March of this year, and it's been working really well. The water tastes good. I've had essentially no issues with this at all. And it's interesting. So we have a 71,000 gallon cistern. All the rainwater ends up in that. And we've been using it for toilet flushing because we haven't had the gray water online. And despite that, we ended the summer with our cistern about 90% full of water. So we were using more water than we expected, and we were still 90% full. So we're feeling really good right now about the amount of water storage that we have. We'll be able to weather some pretty dry periods in the future. I think we'll hold question at the end, but I will just close out by saying, we've, consider this project for ourselves really a tremendous success. Actually, we have learned an incredible amount from being in our own building, living building, and dealing with some of these pretty unique systems. Our staff love being in the building. We've toured, I think, over 3,500 people through, and hopefully inspired them to think about doing something similar. I mentioned it's over 85% leased out. And, as a mission-driven tenant ourselves, having this building and our physical space really aligned with their values has been a pretty huge morale booster and, a benefit that's been strengthening our organization. So, I'm super excited about it. And with that, pass it off for our next presentation.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll jump in there. Let's see here. Let me do one thing really fast. There's not a couple things. And let's see, what was the special trick you did to, oh, there we go. I think it went away. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Josh Cabot. I'm a senior associate at SERA Architects. I've been here for almost 9 years. My background is both in architecture, but I got my undergrad in architectural engineering. So I have a bit of a structural and mechanical, electrical, plumbing background as well. And then I've worked in construction a bit. So I've done a lot of different things. And I was the project architect for the core and shell of the Galleria building that sort of set the stage for our office, and then spent a lot of time working with our office team as well to try to make this project a success. So I'm going to go through a bit about it really fast, and then I'll try to focus most of the presentation on the way that we began to occupy the space and things that we've learned since we took occupancy. Okay, so that's me. Yep, we're going to learn about post-occupancy efforts and how it's pretty essential really to achieve the goals that we're going for, and then the need for change management and how important that really is as we commission our occupants. So SERA Architects, we've been around for about 55 years in Portland. We also have an office in Oakland, California. We had predominantly been in Old Town, really the entire history up until just a little over a year ago when we decided to move to the Galleria. So, a big reason was it's kind of interesting. SERA actually has a history. We had helped Bill Nadeau and company renovate the Galleria back in 1976. Since then, it's undergone a number of renovations. It had been seismically retrofitted in 2011, which was a really great feature for the building. But it has a walk score of 100, a transit score of 93. It's right in the center of the city. And of course, we avoid a lot of carbon by going with an existing building. So it seemed to be a good match for us. It's a full block building, so 200 by 200 feet, which is kind of cool, getting to actually be all on one floor. When we were in Old Town, we were in 2 buildings across 3 floors. We literally had a jaywalk conference room because we were running across Fifth Avenue all the time. And so now we're all together, all on one floor with 4 frontages, facing the outdoor world, which is pretty exciting. And what we've tried to do is organize it into 3 main zones with focus, really having all of our desk space over to the south side, the social space in the center, because we are on the top floor. So we have benefit of the big skylight that is still, the opening is original to the building. As part of our TI, we renovated and replaced that skylight with new high performance glass. And then on the left side of this image, which is the north side, this is the collaboration zone. And with all the meeting space. And one interesting fun fact, something that we we would often place focus space to the north side of most office spaces because of the diffuse daylight. We opted to flip it in this case, and what we've actually found is due to the Ritz-Carlton and its large facade off to our north, it's reflecting just as much daylight into the north side as what you might find on the south a lot of times. So it's been interesting to adapt to that and think that even though it's facing north, you still do get kind of direct daylight that we have to manage. One other quick geeky thing I'll mention about our office. So we not only moved to this new space, but we also underwent a total technology revamp as part of this. And what that meant was we did away with all of our tower computers and we moved to laptops only with a centralized, basically server in our office. So it allows us to have these virtual machines. It's kind of weird. So we might have just our email and a web browser and a few light things on our laptops. And then if we need to get into more robust software, we log into our virtual machines. The cool thing about that is it really helps improve our energy savings. We've now concentrated a lot of the computing to one room in our office where we're cooling it directly right there. It's not towers blowing hot air all over the office. And it gave us a tremendous amount of flexibility to now be able to move around anywhere we want. So diversity, I think, is such a key part of effective comfort really for people and a good indoor environmental quality strategy. You basically let people self-select. If they're feeling cold, if they're feeling distracted by lighting or by others, they can move to other spaces. And so people kind of are constantly migrating throughout the day to the spaces that help them to find their focus or whatever they need to do in that moment. So I'll flip through a few images. You might know, we were really trying to push on biophilia and also trying not to make an overtly branded space, something that was pretty natural and textured. You don't see a big SERA Architects logo when you come in. It's really about trying to, honor daylight. You'll see a lot of natural plants around the space. We call this spot the back porch, which is kind of the warm-up, cool-down zone off of our meeting areas. Here's out in the desk space. And then some of the fun areas with our front of house kitchen on the right. And then what we call the social house underneath a little timber canopy. We're very passionate about timber. This is, of course, an existing building from 1910. And so really no timber in this building. So this was kind of our one moment to express that. So in order to do all this, I'll step back for a second and talk about the building too, because it really helped underpin a lot of what we were able to accomplish up at our office. The Galleria was built in 1910 as a department store. And of course, back then, energy was pretty scarce. Electricity was. And so they obviously put in a lot of passive elements. We have a lot of glazing, which now, you might say, oh, it's the window wall ratio is maybe a little excessive, in fact. But in fact, we've been able to leverage that to our benefit through passive daylighting. And then that big skylight that used to go all the way down to the ground floor and over the past decades has been slowly infilled. It does help to provide a nice social center that's daylit. And just the thermal mass itself, this thing is like a battleship. And although the walls only have an R value of about 3 and the roof had an R value of 8, which we upgraded, the building actually holds on to its energy pretty well. It's thermal inertia basically is pretty high. And so we tried to lean into all of that sort of stuff. And so the way we went about doing it, one big constraint that proved out to be a real opportunity for this project was that Target at the time was on levels 2 and 3 in the building, and they were looking to relocate to level 1. And as you might know, they've since left the building, which is really unfortunate. But at the time, they needed to have both their old store still operational while they were building their new store. And then they needed to just close the door one day on the level 2 and 3 store and open the new store the next day. So no downtime whatsoever. And that meant a lot of kind of figuring out how could we do a mechanical system that would support this new Target while keeping the old one going with the roof space that we had. And it led us into a very decentralized HVAC strategy, which has actually paid off in a lot of different ways. And I think one other strategy that we employed along with it was a design for off mentality. Use the thermal mass of the building, and if at all possible, keep the systems off as much as possible. And so we went to a system where we have VRF up on the roof, so we're all electric. We were able to cut the gas to the building. So now the Galleria is an all electric building. And we distribute the ventilators down through the building. And they're these special heat recovery ventilators. They're actually made in Portland by Ventacity. So each floor has its own ventilators and its own condensing units on the roof. And, unfortunately, with the leasing climate that has happened in Portland, there has not been new leasing activity on some of these floors. And so we're able to just turn those off entirely. So that was kind of it's a silver lining to an otherwise tough situation. And then by going with that approach, that actually gave us another opportunity at SERA in particular. Because we have essentially our own system, we were able to invest a little bit further and add in a bypass filter system. And so what that does is we have 3 modes of sort of ventilation in the building. When we're in blue mode, we have an air sensor up on the roof and a weather station, and it's looking at the indoor and outdoor conditions and says, now's a good time to open the windows. And so we actually kept all the operable windows. We refurbished 25% of them to keep them operable. And then the other 75%, we put in these interior storm windows that effectively made them triple pane. So when we're in blue, it says open the windows. Anybody can open a window if they wish. When we're in yellow mode, that's just efficient mode. And so that's when the windows need to be shut. If they aren't shut, we have sensors for all of them. Then it will tell our staff actually go and shut them, and you'll see blinking lights. And then in red mode is when we have bad outdoor air, typically from wildfires. And so when that is occurring, that is when we have this extra bypass filter with a booster fan that kicks into gear and actually delivers MERV 16 air. It's MERV 13 typically. And so we're taking an energy hit in that moment, but of course, human health is really more important in that moment. And so it's been pretty interesting to see how that's worked out. And we can talk a little bit about how we've commissioned our way through that. So in general, the energy recovery that we deployed was really essential. So even for the building, we were able to show an 80% reduction for the Galleria as a whole. So it's a 113-year-old building, and we're able to pull that thing down from the CBEX baseline in 2003, about 80%, which is roughly 50% better than what code would require today. And then the Galleria, or our floor, I should say, SERA follows roughly with that. We have slightly better EUI on our floor than the building, and that has to do a lot with the triple painting of the windows with those interior storm windows, and a few of the other additional, like demand control ventilation and some other occupancy stuff that we had deployed. Also meant a lot of avoided carbon too, of course, just by reusing the Galleria as a building itself. But then in our own TI, the avoided carbon really came from making some conscious choices around flooring, going with a lot of natural materials, going with low carbon drywall, and a few things like that. So when we look at the Galleria core and shell, we were able to align that. I need to update this slide because we found out just a couple of weeks ago that we're able to actually get LEED Platinum for the building. And we've aligned to the 2030 challenge by meeting that big 80% reduction off of CBEX, which aligns to the Architecture 2030 challenge. That gave us that put us on the path to net zero with Energy Trust. So Unico received a $500,000 incentive, which really helped to offset some of the costs with that mechanical system. And it's fit well 2 stars. Then when we, like up in our floor, on the 5th floor, we were able to take that also LEED Platinum. We've confirmed that. And we're still in pursuit of WELL Platinum. We're pursuing 4 of the 7 petals in the Living Building Challenge, including the Materials Petal. And we're entering the performance period for WELL and LBC here in the new year. And then also looking at ILFI Zero Carbon, which we've been pursuing basically because we're all electric building at a low EUI, and then we're offsetting the rest through community solar. Interesting thing too, Unico pursued community solar for the whole building, which actually is going to give them a savings over time versus just the regular utility rate. So over the next 20 years, they'll save about $120,000 off of their electrical bill just by pursuing community solar. It's a pretty interesting opportunity. So we've done a lot, but that's really not what we're here today to talk about. I was going to talk you through how we moved in and how we've sort of commissioned and learned a lot from our space and continue to learn forward in it. So with moving in, education, pretty essential. We always talk about commissioning the occupants. I think that's really especially important. I suppose if you're an architect too, and you're working with an architecture firm of other architects that are going to move in, there's especially a lot of that. But you may find with other clients that you're actually being able to get a service through helping with post-occupancy or with change management. And so, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement around our office, and then started to build really what was a literal deck that we could go through so that people, when they showed up for those first few days, really understood what they were getting into, like how to get into the building, where to park their bike, how to, work in the back of house kitchen. What do you do with your dishes? What do you do out in the desk space? Should you eat at your desk or not? What if you feel hot or cold or want to open a window? What do you do there? That was a multiple month process. I think as we moved into the space, signage was really essential too, being able to tell people what certain spaces meant. Like in our floor plate, we have a focus zone where if you go there, that is really to work on deadlines and not be talked to whatsoever. And so it's highlighting that, or highlighting maybe what the technology is in certain meeting rooms, things of that nature. So, beyond the change management, then we had to think about what our post-occupancy strategy was and how we were going to evaluate whether we were successful or not. And, part of that is just figuring out how to pull feedback from people. And it is something that I think, a huge point I would make in this talk is that you can never really start too early with some of this. I think it's really something that should be talked about in a design process, because as you're setting goals and developing strategies for achieving those goals, you should also be thinking throughout, how are we going to measure those and ensure that we're actually achieving those goals? So, I think this is relatively simple in that you establish goals, you figure out how to measure them, you outline how you're going to communicate back and forth with people to communicate whether or not you're achieving them, and analyze and make corrective actions. But it's that reiteration that can be super challenging at times, especially as you receive feedback from people, you recalibrate, and making sure you communicate back with them and learn back from them without it being super arduous. And I think we're always working on ways to make the feedback loops less or more frictionless, let's say. So the way we looked at this overall, we sort of looked through post-occupancy in two ways. There's the hardware side, which is really about sensors, how you measure and verify things. We look at trends and the controls. And then we're always doing some tuning that can often be, sort of seasonal in nature as things change. And then the software, which is that commissioning the occupants piece through change management. And then observation and occupancy counts. That's been really interesting for us, especially as people got their own computers and were able to, like own laptops, and they're able to move freely around. Where do people want to sit? What might be driving people to sit in areas longer than in others? And that's something we're still learning a lot about. The surveys and interviews part, we've done a number of surveys that went out after the first 90 days. We told everybody, let's try not to make too many criticisms. The first 90 days we're in the office, let's acclimate. And then we sent out a survey. We sent out a few follow-on ones related to thermal comfort and lighting comfort, just to hear from people in certain areas. And then we've done targeted interviews, especially if we get really specific feedback from certain people, then we might sit down with them and ask them a little bit more about what they were experiencing. And then the real-time feedback is a really key part we'll talk about. From a hardware side, these were all the things that we've been monitoring. So you can see a lot to deal with air quality, both outdoor as well as indoor. That helps us to know, of course, when we should be opening the windows or going into that bypass mode, which is automatic. Basically, when we hit about an AQI of 38, that bypass filter will kick into gear. But we're also measuring our water use, looking at plug loads and energy in many different ways. We're metering a lot of pieces of equipment. And actually, when we took it all into account, there were 38,000 available points of information that we could pull from if we wanted to know it. But it was like information overload, and we needed to be really strategic about what really matters most to us. And, I would say this was another lesson learned. You should really be thinking about how do you want to intuitively label things and develop a sort of a cohesive labeling strategy across all these various pieces of equipment and systems so that things start to really align to each other. And this is actually a snapshot of a spreadsheet that we developed to help form our dashboard with Coppertree using Kaizen. And basically, it was pulling in a lot of default names, and we had to spend time filtering out what really matters and how should we name it. We ended up with still about almost 3,400 points of information, and so there's a lot to chew on for probably years to come. Honestly, here's that the dashboard, the Coppertree Analytics has developed and pulling that information in. And of course, you want to be able to think about what are meaningful ways that we can visualize this information. And so we've been spending some time with that. We have our building management system where we're able to pull out, real-time values or things on 10-minute increments or 1 hour or day increments. But then trying to find ways to make that a little more actionable. I think right now, one of the easiest ways for people around the office to understand air quality outside is just those indicator lights that tell us when to open windows. But we're working on ways to basically show people the air quality in various portions of the office. There was actually a moment even last year where there was some limited floor refinishing that had to occur. And we thought we had all the material safety data sheets and everything ahead of time. And apparently there was a product that one of the contractors used that had VOCs in it. And our air sensors did go off, actually alerted us, and we were able to flush the building and get back to baseline. But it was interesting to see that it is actually working. So, and then this is a visualization that we've put together. This is back in April, but we're looking across all through wildfire season to show some of these differentials where, basically where the dashed line is horizontally across here is demonstrating where we go above 12 parts per micrograms per meters cubed, and that's going to trigger us into our outdoor air mode. But fortunately, with filtration, that's keeping us still very low in our indoor. So things seem to be working really well that way. From a software perspective, the people, it's been a lot of feedback. You can imagine from a number of a bunch of architects. I think people are really stoked to get into the natural sort of or more natural environment, a space that's all together. But there's certainly a lot of real things that people have brought up over time. And so one system that we developed is really just a way to get real-time feedback from people so that we can keep learning in the moment what might be happening. So we put up these QR codes around the office. People can just scan those with their phone. Maybe they're walking from meeting to meeting or something, and then they're able to fill that out. They could also do it on their computer if they want to. And that feeds into a spreadsheet where we're basically identifying what the issues are. They've prioritized it. Then we look at that. We start to assign who needs to handle, who are the champions for these particular issues. And then we, circle back with people to say, yeah, this is what we've learned, or this is what we can do or what we can't do. So in general, these are kind of our main takeaways. We need to start thinking about, like I said before, start to think about post-occupancy when you're still in the design. And what are those things you can do to try to help streamline install, commissioning, facility management, and the other pieces of post-occupancy. The change management piece is really critical. Continue to communicate and calibrate to ensure occupants feel like they can, deliver that feedback at any time. We want to hear the feedback. That's the only way we're ever going to be able to calibrate this stuff and know if we need to make any real systemic changes. And then, stay curious about your space. We're really calling this a living laboratory. We've actually been partnering with NIA and Ecotope on a study that is over the course of about a year, and it's meant to look at dedicated outdoor air systems coupled with VRF and with operable windows to basically understand when we're in these bad outdoor air modes, what is the energy penalty that we're getting. And so we're hopeful that we'll have a lot more to share after kind of next year's wildfire season. Also working with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs on some other aspects of the same system over the course of a year. And so, hopefully we'll have a lot more to learn, and we want to continue to partner with others that want to come in and study what our space can, what it's doing well and maybe what it's not doing well. So I guess to wrap it up, I would say, thank you for letting me present. Thank you to the Fortis construction team as a general contractor. EcoTope is our mechanical engineer. PAE was our electrical engineer for the project. That was a really essential team overall, and to Unico for investing in the base building that really made so much of this possible. So I think I will leave it probably there, and we can take questions.
Mark, Josh, thank you. That was so fun and exciting and informational, and you crammed so much good stuff into a very short amount of time. We have 5 questions, 2 for Mark, 3 for Josh. Mark, we'll start with you. You mentioned urinal waste being converted to fertilizer. Was there any special consideration given around the potential for pharmaceuticals being in the urine?
I don't think no, I don't think there was. There was a separate sort of process going on that we weren't directly involved with on doing that. The way that it happens, the actual process itself involves a steam distillation process that I think will probably manage most of that, but I don't think it's been specifically tested to find out. We're definitely not certified as an organic fertilizer, I can say that.
Mark, one more for you. You mentioned the radiant floor, and there was a conversation in the chat around electric or gas. Is it correct to assume living building does not allow any combustion, so that radiant floor is electric?
That is correct. Yeah, it's all off of the heat pump system.
Josh, we got a few questions for you. Are you ready to be interrogated? So
let's do it. Yeah.
Around your network speed. So all the cloud computing. Question around what is that network speed to accommodate it?
So we did invest in a fiber system. That in and of itself is a lesson learned about how fast you can get fiber delivered to your building. We actually operated what we called pioneer days at our office the first 2 months or so, where we actually still use the remote like Wi-Fi thing off the roof that the contractor had used to deliver internet for themselves. But then we brought fiber in. So I can't tell you the exact speed, but it's fast. It's pretty seamless. I can work at home, work in some other state, or in the office, and pretty seamlessly. I think, I will say this with some of these virtual machines, I think when you get into really robust software, I know sometimes our Revit users are like, there are times where you feel like you're communicating with Mars, but that can be kind of intermittent. And I want to believe that's less about the internet speed and maybe more about even internal things. So, yeah.
You mean I can't be streaming music and doing? Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
More of a nuts and bolts question for you, Josh. The roof. Do you remember off the top of your head what the R value is?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I like that one because so here was a weird opportunity. The building is on the National Register of Historic Places, so we couldn't do a whole lot with the exterior. But of course, you could re-roof it and insulate the roof. But as being on the National Register, it's exempt from energy code technically. However, of course, we don't want to just leave it as is. So when we were going to re-roof, we ran an analysis to see, do we need to go all the way up to code R38, or is there a sort of diminishing returns? And we actually found that at R20, it's going to give us the best performance, and you really don't pick that much more up by going a lot thicker. And that was, of course, the thicker you go, you got to rework all the drainage, some of the doorways up there and other things. And so R20 was what we insulated it to.
And then Josh, one more question. You mentioned LEED Platinum. Congratulations, huge. Is that the entire building, core and shell, TI?
It's both, yeah. So the core and shell got LEED Platinum for core and shell, and then the TI got LEED Platinum for commercial interiors. And we just received the news just a couple of weeks ago.
That covers the questions in the chat. Anybody here in the room, please feel free to just start talking if you have questions. We are keeping an eye on the clock. We'll wrap up in the next 5-6. One thing I always am curious about is both of these examples are so innovative. Mark, you mentioned the coordination with Reach and Renaissance, and Josh, you showed that, how many certifications you were chasing for your office. Was there some innovative idea that your teams were really jazzed about that hey, that went really well, exactly like we envisioned it, or hey, we did all this work to think through this idea, but in the practical reality turned out to be something totally different. This is an on-the-spot question, but do any anecdotal experiences jump to your minds?
I mean, I can jump in. I'll say the partnership with Reach was something that took us a little while to kind of get comfortable with. I think when we started out, we wanted to be able to stand on the side of the street and look at our net zero energy building. And that's just not going to happen in, Old Town Portland. And it's not going to happen for a lot of tall buildings in urban environments. And finding that connection and realizing that we could do this donation and get enough additionality of renewable energy on to, feel good about calling our project a net zero energy project. I felt like kind of opened the door to maybe something that was a little bit more than the sum of its parts of like, we have a really sustainable project that also has this social benefit now that is filling a big need in our community. So it's a story that I like about our building now.
I'm just responding to somebody in the chat that was asking about WELL. And yeah, we're aiming for WELL Platinum. I think that I'll just write there, the air quality piece is probably the key. I think maybe that's the thing that was the most exciting. At first, it starts out really geeky. It's just, oh, we decided to go with a dedicated outdoor air system. So we're delivering fresh air, but we're recovering that energy before we exhaust it out of the building. And I think way back when, that really helped us on some of our energy saving goals. But the cool thing that unlocked was this resilient kind of wildfire mode, and it really started to get into more human health and wellness. And I think it engaged people in our office that you usually wouldn't even think too much about the mechanical systems of buildings. And I got to tell you, I'm just so sold whenever possible now moving forward to try to go to decentralized systems. I know it's not always the most affordable, but for any of you architects that have had to detail so many rooftop screens around school bus size chillers and air handlers and stuff, it's like, man, if you can break this thing down, and we're using ventilators that are manufactured locally, that are energy recovery, using energy recovery to a high degree, they're quiet. It is just awesome. So I think it's pretty neat when you can get energy performance and human health to kind of come together in the same strategy. It's pretty neat.
In 1 minute or less, I'm thinking about the challenge of working on a space for your own team. Might be the hardest client. So respect and acknowledging the work that goes into that. But do you find, be it return on investment, financial, or like you just mentioned, Josh, health, indoor air quality, do you find that each of these experiences you're now being able to leverage into work in other maybe typologies or with other clients to say, here's, so often these things get stifled just with construction costs, but are you starting to see this starting to amplify into, hey, we did it here, we can do it with you here?
Go for it, Mark. Do you have some? Sure.
Yeah. I mean, definitely on the Living Building Challenge side, just being able to speak to lived experience of, dealing with composting systems or the radiant floors or, any of the number of unique systems is invaluable. So yes, absolutely. Well worth the pain and suffering of designing it for our own team.
Yeah, I think, what we were facing at the same time, and probably PAE was too, is that we were moving back into the office after having been totally work from home in the pandemic too. So it was like, you have to really make a lot of compelling reasons to bring people back to the office. And so I think having the lush finishes and natural plants and a shuffleboard table and stuff is cool. But the health part and the resilience piece, I think, is hopefully really enduring. And our hope is that it is going to help eventually, if we can turn things around, to really attract people to buildings like this, because they're going to be able to show, if it's a large corporate client that has ESG goals, and they're able to point to look, we're moving into an all electric building, we're avoiding a lot of embodied carbon and scope 3 emissions by making this choice, and look at what it can be for our people. I know it can be sometimes intangible to assign productivity to health, but we're really hopeful that that it's a compelling story to others, not just to ourselves. But I think everybody here is really bought into it.
5 p.m. on the nose. I want to thank everybody who joined us today. We got started on time. Mark, Josh, you crammed so much good stuff into a short amount of time. We're ending on time. In the chat, Kathy mentioned the recording of this session will be available on the AIAO program archive page, so go check it out there. Also, go check out the upcoming DDS and sign up for more fun stuff. But with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Big round of applause. Mark, Josh, that was fabulous. Thank you both.
Thanks for letting us
Thank you.
present.
All right, have a great night, everybody.
We know how to stick the landing. Thanks.
Yeah.
Take care, y'all. Bye.
Thank you, you too.